The snake doesn't announce itself with a rattle when it's living in your house. You learn this lesson not in a boardroom or a battlefield, but on a Tuesday afternoon when your phone buzzes with a message that rewrites every memory you've ever trusted. Your stomach doesn't just drop, it liquefies. Your brain scrambles for explanations that don't exist. And the worst part? The person holding the knife isn't some shadowy figure from your periphery. They're the one who knew your safe combination. They're the one you told about your father's drinking. They're the one who held your face during your darkest hour and said, "I've got you." Here's what nobody tells you about betrayal. It requires intimacy. Strangers can rob you. Co-workers can compete with you. The universe can break you. But betray you? That's a privilege reserved for the inner circle. The back door only opens from the inside. You're watching this because somewhere in your chest, there's a splinter. A relationship that doesn't feel right. A friend whose energy shifts when you're not looking. A partner who says all the right words while your intuition screams that the music has stopped. You've been gaslighting yourself into trust because the alternative, admitting you let a wolf through the gate, feels like a verdict on your judgment rather than a reflection of their character. By the time we're done, you won't just spot the wolves. You'll understand why you keep inviting them in. You'll learn the 3 specific communication patterns that predict betrayal with terrifying accuracy. And you'll have a surgical protocol for cleaning your circle without becoming the villain in someone else's story. The knife never comes from the front, but the hands that hold it, they've been shaking yours for years. Let's find them before they find your spine. Let me introduce you to a man named Frank Abagnale. Not the Leonardo DiCaprio version from the movie, the real one. Before he became the FBI's consultant on financial fraud, Abagnale was perhaps the greatest imposter in American history. He cashed $2.5 million in fraudulent checks across 26 countries by the time he was 21. He posed as a Pan Am pilot, a pediatrician, a lawyer. He didn't just fool strangers, he fooled professionals trained to spot deception. Here's what Abagnale discovered about why people believed him. It had almost nothing to do with his acting skills. It had everything to do with their desire to believe. When Abagnale walked into a bank wearing a pilot's uniform, the tellers didn't see a teenager with a fake ID. They saw what they wanted to see: authority, adventure, a story worth telling their spouses about later. Their hunger for a meaningful interaction overrode their surveillance systems. Abagnale didn't trick them. They tricked themselves. This is the first psychological landmine you're walking through daily: the projection of your own integrity. You're a person who keeps promises. When you say you'll be there, you're there. When someone trusts you with their story, you guard it like your own. Because this is your operating system. You project it onto everyone you meet. You assume that because you wouldn't stab a friend, they won't stab you. You assume that because you value loyalty, they value loyalty. This isn't naivety. This is a cognitive shortcut your brain uses to navigate a world with 8 billion strangers. Psychologists call it the false consensus effect. Our tendency to overestimate how much others share our beliefs, values, and behaviors. In 1977, Stanford researcher Lee Ross demonstrated this by asking students to walk around campus wearing a sandwich board that said, "Eat at Joe's." The students who agreed to wear the sign estimated that 62% of their peers would also agree. The students who refused estimated that only 33% would agree. Both groups projected their own choices onto everyone else. You're doing this with loyalty. Because you're loyal, you see loyalty everywhere. Because will change how you see trust. In 2018, will change how you see trust. In 2018, psychologists at Dartmouth College published a study on what they called moral blind spots. They found that people are remarkably accurate at predicting selfish behavior in strangers, but consistently overestimate the moral character of those closest to them. Why? Because intimacy creates what researchers call a positivity halo. The more time you spend with someone, the more your brain weaves their past kindnesses into a narrative that predicts future behavior, even when their present actions contradict it. Your college roommate who drove you to the airport for 4 years? Your brain uses that data point to excuse the fact that he's been mocking your career choices behind your back. Your business partner who lent you money when you were struggling? That memory becomes a shield against the evidence that she's been skimming from the accounts. The ancient wisdom you've been missing. Sun Tzu didn't write The Art of War for people who wanted to feel good about humanity. He wrote it for generals who needed to survive. And in Chapter 7, he drops a line that should be tattooed on your prefrontal cortex. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Most people read this as military strategy, but Sun Tzu was talking about human psychology. A trapped animal fights differently than a content one. And the people in your life? You've given them no reason to reveal their desperation because you've never created conditions where they'd need to choose between their comfort and your well-being. You've made trust too easy to fake. Trust is not a feeling. Feelings are weather. They change with the season, the alcohol level in your blood, the quality of the last conversation. Trust is structural. It's load-bearing. You don't feel your way across a bridge suspended over a canyon. You check the engineering. The greatest con artists in human history, from Victor Lustig, who sold the Eiffel Tower twice, to Elizabeth Holmes, who fooled Kissinger and Murdoch, understood something you've been taught to ignore. People want to be fooled. They want the story. They want the connection. They want to believe they're special enough to be told the truth. Your job isn't to be suspicious of everyone. Your job is to stop trusting your emotional responses and start trusting patterns. Words are perfume. Emotions are fireworks. Behavior is the foundation. And foundations, they crack before they collapse. In 1963, a Yale psychologist named Stanley Milgram published findings that would haunt the field of social psychology for decades. He'd recruited ordinary people for what they thought was a memory study. In reality, he was testing how far they'd go in hurting a stranger simply because an authority figure told them to. You know this story. The shocks, the screams. The 65% of participants who delivered what they believed were life-threatening voltages. But here's what Milgram discovered that rarely makes it into the textbooks. The participants who obeyed most completely weren't the aggressive ones or the weak ones. They were the ones who smiled most during the experiment. The men who delivered the highest shocks were also the most likely to reassure the victim. They'd say things like, "It's for science," or "It'll be over soon," or "I'm sure you're strong enough to handle this." They performed kindness while causing harm. They comforted themselves with their own words while their hands did the damage. This is the psychological architecture of betrayal. It's not mustache-twirling villains monologuing about their evil plans. It's people who genuinely believe they're good while quietly positioning themselves to survive at your expense. Let me show you the 3 faces they wear. Face 1. The Keyhole Confessor. Imagine you're at a coffee shop with someone you've met 3 times. Maybe it's a new colleague. Maybe it's a date. Maybe it's someone from your gym. The conversation has been pleasant, surface level, comfortable, normal. Then, somewhere around the 20-minute mark, they lean forward. Their voice drops. Their eyes get wet. I've never told anyone this, but what follows is heavy. Abuse, betrayal, trauma, a secret they claim they've guarded for years. And in that moment, something happens inside you. Your chest tightens with empathy. Your ego swells with the honor of being chosen. You think, they must really trust me. They must see something special in me. We have a real connection. You have been hacked. In attachment theory, this is called trauma bonding speed run. The person isn't sharing because they trust you. They're sharing because they can't not share. They have no boundary between public and private, between stranger and intimate. Their vulnerability isn't a gift. It's a test. They're seeing if you'll play the role they need you to play. Rescuer, confessor, emotional garbage disposal. Dr. George Simon, a leading expert on manipulation, identifies this as a classic tactic he calls the pity play. The goal isn't connection. The goal is to create an immediate imbalance. They've given you something heavy. Now you owe them. Now you're invested. Now you can't walk away without feeling like the villain who abandoned someone in pain. Here's what the research actually says about vulnerability and trust. In 2015, researchers at the University of British Columbia studied how trust develops in new relationships. They found that gradual, reciprocal self-disclosure predicted healthy long-term bonds. But premature, one-sided emotional dumping? That predicted exactly the opposite. The people who shared too much too soon were rated by study participants as less trustworthy, less stable, and more likely to gossip. Your instincts were right. You just misinterpreted them. That slight discomfort you felt when they went too deep too fast. That wasn't judgment. That was your threat detection system pinging you with accurate data that your social conditioning overrode. In Seneca's On Benefits, the Roman philosopher warns against accepting gifts from people you don't know, not because the gifts are poisoned, but because the obligation is. When someone gives you something you can't reciprocate, whether it's a secret, a confession, or a trauma, they've purchased a piece of your autonomy. You're now the debtor in a relationship you never agreed to. The Keyhole Confessor isn't looking for a friend. They're looking for collateral. Phase 2. The Thermostat. Let me tell you about the most dangerous man in Shakespeare. Not Iago, he's too obvious. Not Macbeth, he's too ambitious. The most dangerous man is the one you barely remember. Lord Grey, a minor character in Henry VI, who appears in exactly one scene. Grey is captured by rebel forces. They give him a choice: join their cause or die. And Grey says something remarkable. He says, "I will be yours, for I do love my life." He switches sides immediately, without hesitation, without pretense. Here's why this matters. The rebels don't trust him. They know he'll switch again the moment survival demands it. So they don't let him fight. They don't let him plan. They put him in the rear with the supplies, where he can't do damage. Grey survives the play, but he's irrelevant to everything that matters. You have Greys in your life. You call them friends. They call themselves peacemakers, or neutrals, or people who don't like drama. But here's what they really are. Thermostats set to whatever temperature keeps them comfortable. When conflict arises, when someone disrespects you, when a line is crossed, when a vote needs to be cast, the thermostat feels the room. They check which way the wind is blowing, and then they adjust accordingly. They'll tell you they see both sides. They'll tell you they're staying out of it. They'll tell you they love everyone. In 1951, Solomon Asch conducted his famous conformity experiments. You've probably seen the clips. The line judgment tasks, the Confederates giving wrong answers, the subjects buckling under group pressure. But here's what most summaries miss. About 25% of participants never conformed. They gave the right answer regardless of what everyone else said. Another 25% conformed almost every time. But the largest group, nearly 50%, conformed sometimes. They'd go with the group in some trials and resist in others. And when researchers interviewed this middle group, they found something fascinating. These participants didn't have strong opinions about the lines. They were just trying to get through the experiment without conflict. They wanted to be liked by the researchers and by the Confederates and by whoever was watching. They were thermostats, trying to regulate everyone's temperature at once. Your thermostat friends aren't evil. They're just exhausted by the prospect of taking a stand. But here's the hard truth. Loyalty that costs nothing is worth nothing. If someone won't risk your disapproval to defend you, they won't risk anyone's disapproval for you. If they maintain friendships with people who've harmed you, they're not staying above the drama. They're keeping a foot in both camps so they can flee to whichever side wins. Dante didn't put the violent in the deepest circle of hell. He put the indifferent, the ones who, in a moment of moral crisis, said, "I don't want to get involved. Because the violent at least have conviction. The indifferent have only their own comfort. Phase 3. The mirror. There's a phenomenon in pop culture called the Columbo effect. Named after the detective played by Peter Falk, it describes how people underestimate those who project simplicity. Columbo seemed bumbling, distracted, harmless. He'd ask messy questions, forget his notebook, ramble about his wife. And while suspects were busy dismissing him, he was building cases that would put them away for life. The mirror uses the opposite tactic. They don't project simplicity. They project virtue. They tell you how honest they are. They broadcast their loyalty. They share posts about integrity and tag you in quotes about true friendship. They perform goodness like a street musician performs guitar, loudly, publicly, and for tips. In psychology, this is called reaction formation. It's a defense mechanism where a person behaves in the extreme opposite of how they feel, because their true feelings are too threatening to acknowledge. The insecure person performs confidence. The cruel person performs kindness. The disloyal person performs loyalty. Dr. Robert Hare, the world's leading expert on psychopathy, notes in his book Without Conscience that one of the clearest indicators of predatory behavior is excessive claims of virtue. The truly dangerous don't try to hide their darkness. They try to blind you with their light. They want you so focused on their performance of goodness that you never inspect the substance. The neuroscience of the mask. When someone lies about facts, I didn't take the money, their brain shows specific patterns of cognitive load. They have to construct a false narrative while suppressing the true one. But when someone lies about who they are, I'm the most loyal person you'll ever meet, their brain shows almost no load at all. Why? Because they've told themselves this story so many times that they've started believing it. The mirror isn't consciously deceiving you. They've deceived themselves first. They've built an identity around being the good one, the honest one, the one who always shows up. And because they believe their own PR, they feel entitled to cut corners. They feel that their intention to be good outweighs their actual behavior. In Plato's Republic, Socrates dismantles the myth of the perfectly just man. He asks his students to imagine 2 rings, one that makes you invisible, one that makes you seem virtuous while actually being vicious. Which person is more dangerous? The one who openly pursues power, or the one who pursues power while convincing everyone, including themselves, that they're serving the greater good? The answer is obvious. The open enemy you can fight. The false friend you invite to the strategy meeting. You've identified the faces, you've seen the patterns, but knowing and acting are separated by a canyon of self-doubt. You think, maybe I'm being paranoid, maybe I'm projecting, maybe they're just going through something. You need data, not feelings, not intuitions. Data. In engineering, they don't trust a bridge because it looks strong. They drive trucks over it. They measure the flex. They find the failure point before the failure finds them. You need to drive trucks over your relationships. Here are 3 specific stress tests. Safe, surgical, and devastatingly effective at revealing who's actually on your side. Test 1. The boundary line for the Keyhole Confessor. The Keyhole Confessor operates on emotional debt. They give you their pain so you'll feel obligated to carry it. To test them, you must refuse the currency. The next time they dump something heavy, a crisis, a complaint, a trauma dump that feels like a demand, you're going to respond with a boundary. Not a harsh one, not a cold one, just a clean one. I hear that you're struggling, and I care about you. I don't have the capacity to hold this right now. Have you considered talking to a professional? Watch what happens. A healthy person with genuine connection skills will respect this. They might feel a little embarrassed about oversharing. They might apologize. They'll certainly pull back and recalibrate. Because healthy people understand that relationships have rhythms, that not every moment is a confessional, that your emotional bandwidth isn't an unlimited resource. The Keyhole Confessor? They'll escalate. They'll say things like, "I thought you were different. I guess I was wrong about you. Fine, I'll just deal with this alone like always." They're not expressing hurt. They're punishing you for refusing to play your assigned role. They're revealing that your value to them isn't as a friend. It's as a container for their unprocessed pain. When you decline to be the container, the mask slipped. Dr. Brené Brown's work on vulnerability is often misinterpreted as share everything with everyone. But Brown is explicit that vulnerability requires boundaries. In Daring Greatly, she writes, "Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind." When you set a boundary with someone who's trauma dumping, you're actually being kinder than when you let them believe their behavior is acceptable. You're giving them feedback they desperately need. If the relationship ends because you set one boundary, it wasn't a relationship. It was a transaction you finally stopped funding. Test 2. The price of admission for the thermostat. The thermostat's defining feature is their refusal to take sides. They maintain access to everyone by committing to no one. To test them, you must make neutrality costly. Create a situation where they have to choose. Not a dramatic life or death choice, just a clear one. You're planning a dinner. You're inviting people. One of them is someone who's disrespected you, not a mortal enemy, just someone whose behavior you've discussed with the thermostat before. You say, "I'm organizing something for Saturday. I'm inviting you, but not person who disrespected you. I need people around me who've shown they care. Are you in?" Now watch the thermostat's brain melt. They can't say yes without excluding someone, and exclusion feels uncomfortable. They can't say no without revealing that they value access to that other person more than they value supporting you. So they'll try every escape hatch. "Can we do 2 different dinners? Maybe I'll just stop by late. Let me see what my schedule looks like. Hold the line. I need to know by tomorrow. Are you in?" The psychology, what you're testing, is called costly signaling. In evolutionary biology, animals develop traits that are expensive to produce, like the peacock's tail, specifically because the cost proves the signal is honest. A cheap signal, like "I'm your friend," proves nothing. A costly signal, like choosing you over comfort, proves everything. The thermostat will reveal themselves by their inability to pay the cost. They'll dodge, deflect, and delay until you drop the subject. And then they'll continue their relationships with both camps, grateful that you stopped pressuring them to be real. Let them go. The people who won't choose you when the choice costs something won't be there when the choice costs everything. Test 3. The attention tax for the mirror. The mirror runs on validation. Their identity as the good person requires an audience to reflect it back. To test them, you must become a dull mirror. Stop applauding their virtue. When they post their moral declarations, don't like them. When they tell stories about their kindness, nod and change the subject. When they perform goodness, treat it as ordinary, as expected, as boring. This is agonizing for the mirror. Their entire psychological structure depends on external reinforcement. Without your applause, they have to face something terrifying. They don't know who they are when no one's watching. Within 2 to 3 weeks of this treatment, one of 2 things will happen. Option A, they'll escalate their performance. They'll do something more dramatic, more visible, more obviously virtuous. They're cranking the volume because you stopped listening. This escalation often involves throwing someone else under the bus, exposing a villain so they can play the hero. Watch who they sacrifice for your attention. Option B, they'll turn on you, quietly at first. Little digs, subtle criticisms, comments about how you've changed or become negative. They're punishing you for withholding the validation they need. This punishment is the real them. The good person was the mask. The angry, entitled person underneath? That's who you'd eventually face if you ever needed them to actually be good instead of just seeming good. In Stoic philosophy, There's a concept called the inner citadel. It's the part of you that remains unchanged by external events. The mirror has no inner citadel. Their identity is borrowed from your reaction. When you stop reacting, they collapse into confusion and rage. Epictetus said, "If you want to know what someone truly values, look at what they seek attention for." The mirror seeks attention for their goodness. That means they value the appearance of goodness, not goodness itself. You've run the tests. The results are in. And now you're sitting with the heavy realization that people you've loved, trusted, and invested in are not who you thought they were. Your first instinct will be to confront, to expose, to burn it down with the satisfaction of them knowing that you know. Don't. Confrontation is catharsis disguised as justice. It feels productive because your body releases tension. But in reality, you're giving the manipulator exactly what they want. One last chance to manipulate you. One last chance to make you doubt yourself. One last chance to spin the narrative so that you become the villain and they become the victim. I want you to remember a name: Kim Philby. Philby was one of the most successful spies in British history, or so everyone thought. For decades, he was a high-ranking MI6 officer, trusted with the deepest secrets of Western intelligence. He was friends with the most powerful people in London. He was awarded honors. He was beloved. And for the entire time, he was working for the Soviet Union. When MI6 finally suspected Philby, they didn't confront him immediately. They didn't call him into a room and demand answers. They slowly, quietly, systematically removed his access. They gave him less sensitive information. They transferred him to roles with no intelligence value. They built a wall between him and the secrets he was stealing. Philby knew something was wrong, but he couldn't fight what he couldn't see. He couldn't manipulate people who'd stopped engaging. By the time he realized he'd been neutralized, the damage he could do was zero. This is your template. You don't need to announce your departure. You don't need to explain why you're pulling back. You don't need to give them a chance to defend, explain, or counterattack. You just need to become boring. For the Keyhole Confessor, stop asking follow-up questions about their problems. When they trauma dump, respond with polite, uninvested phrases. That sounds hard. I hope things get better. Don't offer solutions. Don't share your own struggles in return. Become a wall that makes no sound when they throw things at it. Within weeks, they'll find someone else to carry their weight. They're not attached to you. They're attached to the function you perform. When you stop performing it, you become invisible to them. For the thermostat, stop inviting them to things that require loyalty. Stop sharing your struggles. Stop asking for their opinion on conflicts. Treat them as what they've revealed themselves to be, an acquaintance who's pleasant but unreliable. Keep conversations to weather, sports, and surface-level topics. When they ask why you seem distant, shrug. Just busy. Life's been hectic. The thermostat will feel the shift, but can't fight it because you're not accusing them of anything. They'll drift toward the next group that offers them comfort without requiring commitment. Withdraw all validation. No likes, no comments, no acknowledgement of their virtue signaling. When they perform goodness, change the subject. When they fish for compliments, don't bite. Starve them so completely that your orbit becomes a desert. The mirror will eventually turn on you openly, and when they do, you'll have the cleanest evidence of who they really are. But by then, you'll be so far removed that their attacks will miss you entirely. The psychological principle at work. This is called extinction in behavioral psychology. When a behavior stops being reinforced, it eventually ceases. The Keyhole Confessor stops confessing to you when you stop reacting. The thermostat stops hedging when there's nothing to hedge against. The mirror stops performing when the audience walks out. You're not ghosting them. Ghosting is sudden disappearance that leaves confusion and pain. You're doing something more sophisticated. You're slowly, calmly, consistently changing the reinforcement schedule. You're teaching them, through your behavior, that the old ways of engaging with you no longer work. What not to do. The counterintuitive warning. Do not explain yourself to mutual friends. Do not build a case. Do not try to warn others about who these people really are. Here's why. The people who need to see the truth will see it eventually, through their own experience. And the people who don't, they'll resent you for trying to open their eyes before they're ready. You'll look bitter, paranoid, or controlling. The manipulators will use your attempts to warn others as proof that you're the problem. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the absence of fuel. Manipulators burn bright when you throw logs on their fire. When you stop throwing logs, they sputter in the dark, invisible, irrelevant. Let them wonder what happened. Let them spin theories. Let them tell themselves stories about why you pulled away. None of it matters, because none of it reaches you. You're not punishing them. You're protecting your energy. And the most sophisticated protection is the kind they can't even feel until after it's complete. There's a question you've been waiting for me to answer. It's been sitting in the back of your mind through every example, every test, every extraction strategy. So, I trust no one? I become a paranoid hermit, alone in my apartment, watching shadows? No, that's not wisdom. That's trauma wearing a trench coat and pretending to be wisdom. Paranoia is just naivety's anxious cousin. Both are reactions to the world rather than strategies for navigating it. The goal isn't isolation. The goal is precision. Let me introduce you to a study that will reframe everything. In 2005, researchers at UCLA published findings on what they called high-quality relationships. They followed hundreds of people over a decade, tracking their health, happiness, and success. The variable that predicted everything wasn't the number of relationships. It wasn't even the closeness of relationships. It was the consistency of relationships. People who had even one person they could count on. One person who showed up, who chose them, who didn't fluctuate with the wind, outperformed those with dozens of fair-weather connections on every metric. Income, health, longevity, happiness. One person, that's all it takes. The new framework. Trust as a ladder, not a switch. Most people treat trust like a light switch. It's either on or off. You trust someone completely or you trust no one. This binary thinking is why you've been hurt. You gave full access to people who'd only earned the first rung. Here's how trust actually works. Rung 1, reliability. Can they do what they say they'll do? Show up on time, return the money they borrowed? This is the bottom rung. Test it with small things before you test it with big ones. Rung 2, confidentiality. Can they hold information without spreading it? Do they gossip about others to you? If they do, they'll gossip about you to others. Watch what they say about people, not just what they say to you. Rung 3, costly support. Have they ever chosen you over their own comfort? Have they defended you when it was awkward? Have they told you something hard because it was true? This is the rung where most people fail. Rung 4, shared values. Do you want the same things? Not the same hobbies, the same principles. Do you both believe loyalty matters? Do you both believe honesty is non-negotiable? Do you both believe in growth, in accountability, in showing up? Rung 5, proven history. Have they been through something with you? A crisis, a failure, a loss, and remained steady? Have you seen them under pressure and watched their character hold? Most people in your life belong on rungs 1 or 2. They're fine for coffee. They're fine for casual conversation. They're not fine for your secrets, your dreams, or your struggles. And that's okay. You don't need everyone on rung 5. You need 1 or 2. The problem hasn't been that you trusted the wrong people. The problem has been that you gave rung 5 access to people who'd never climbed past rung 2. Aristotle wrote about 3 types of friendship in his Nicomachean Ethics. 2,000 years later, they're still the most useful framework for understanding who belongs where. Friendships of utility. You're useful to each other. work colleagues, networking contacts, the person who can get you concert tickets. These relationships are valuable but conditional. When the utility ends, the friendship ends. Nothing wrong with this, as long as you don't mistake it for something more. Friendships of pleasure. You enjoy each other. Gym buddies, drinking friends, people who make you laugh. These relationships are also valuable and also conditional. When the pleasure ends, when someone stops being fun, the friendship ends. Again, fine, as long as you're clear about what it is. Friendships of virtue. You share values. You're committed to each other's growth. You choose each other even when there's no utility and no pleasure in the moment. These relationships are rare. Aristotle thought most people would have one or two in a lifetime. They require time, testing, and mutual investment. Look at your circle through Aristotle's lens. How many people have you misclassified? How many utility friends have you given virtue access? How many pleasure friends have you trusted with your deepest fears? The extraction you just performed, the silent removal of the keyhole confessors, the thermostats, the mirrors, wasn't about becoming alone. It was about clearing space so you could finally see who actually belongs on the higher rungs. The people who can be trusted often feel slightly disappointing at first. They don't sweep you off your feet. They don't create instant chemistry. They don't mirror your every interest and finish your sentences. They're slower, more cautious. They ask questions instead of declaring allegiance. They share gradually, reciprocally, appropriately. In 2012, researchers at Cornell found that people consistently overvalue spark in new relationships and undervalue safety. The relationships that lasted weren't the ones that started with fireworks. They were the ones that started with steady, predictable warmth. The keyhole confessor feels like a soulmate in week 1 and a stranger in month 6. The real friend feels like an acquaintance in week 1 and an anchor in year 6. Patience is the price of precision. There's one person we haven't examined, one set of behaviors we haven't tested, one face we haven't held up to the light. Yours. I know. You didn't sign up for this part. You came here to learn about other people's betrayal, not to examine your own reflection. But Machiavelli wrote something that should sit in your bones. It is double pleasure to deceive the deceiver. If you want to spot manipulators, you must first stop manipulating yourself. The self-audit questions. Question 1. Are you a keyhole confessor? Do you use your pain to bond with people too quickly? When you meet someone new, do you find yourself sharing trauma within the first few conversations? Do you feel closer to people after you've dumped something heavy on them? This isn't authenticity. It's boundarylessness. And boundarylessness attracts predators the way honey attracts ants. You're not building intimacy. You're advertising that you have no walls. The wolves smell that from miles away. Practice holding your story. Let people earn it. When you feel the urge to share something vulnerable, pause. Ask yourself, have they earned this? Have they shown me they can hold it? Or am I using vulnerability to speed-run connection because I'm afraid of being alone with my own history? Question 2. Are you a thermostat? Think about the last time someone you loved was in conflict with someone else. Did you take a stand? Did you choose? Or did you tell yourself you were staying neutral while secretly hoping the whole thing would just go away? Neutrality feels like peacemaking when you're the one practicing it. But to the person who needed you, it felt like abandonment. The thermometer doesn't just fail their friends, they fail themselves. They never learn that they can survive conflict. They never learn that taking a stand clarifies everything. They live their whole lives in the gray, never feeling the solid ground of conviction. The next time conflict arises, choose. Even if you choose wrong, choose. Experience what it feels like to have a position. Experience what it feels like to defend someone, even when it's uncomfortable. You can't build loyalty muscles without exercising them. Question 3. Are you a mirror? Do you need people to see you as good? Do you perform your kindness? Do you feel unseen when your virtue goes unacknowledged? This is the hardest one to face because it's the most socially rewarded. The world loves people who perform goodness. It gives them likes, followers, validation. But the performance becomes a cage. You start needing the applause. You start resenting people who don't clap. You start believing your own press releases while your actual behavior drifts further from your self-image. Do one good thing this week that no one will ever know about. Not a small thing, something that costs you. Help someone who can't thank you. Give something you'll never get credit for. Sit with the feeling of being good without anyone reflecting it back. If that feeling is unbearable, you've been performing, not living. Dr. Daniel Goleman, who popularized the concept of emotional intelligence, wrote extensively about what he calls the blind spot. It's the gap between who we think we are and who we actually are. And here's the terrifying part. The blind spot grows larger the more certain we are that we don't have one. People most convinced of their own self-awareness are consistently rated by others as the least self-aware. The people most certain of their loyalty are often the first to crack under pressure. The oracle at Delphi had 2 inscriptions above its entrance. One you know thyself. The other is less famous, but equally important. Nothing in excess. Know thyself, including your capacity for the very behaviors you're learning to spot in others. And nothing in excess, including your certainty that you're not capable of betrayal. You are. We all are. Under the right pressure, under the right fear, under the right temptation, any of us could become the Keyhole Confessor, the Thermostat, the mirror. The goal isn't to pretend you're immune. The goal is to build enough self-awareness that you catch yourself before you become the person someone else has to extract. The cleanest truth: the people who betray us are not monsters. They're humans who made choices we didn't want to see. And the people we've betrayed, we're not monsters either. We're humans who made choices we didn't want to admit. This isn't cynicism. This isn't moral relativism. This is the ground floor of actual wisdom. Everyone is capable of everything. The question isn't, is this person good or bad? The question is, under what conditions does this person's shadow emerge? And can I live with those conditions? When you stop needing people to be saints, you stop being surprised when they're not. When you stop needing yourself to be a saint, you stop hiding from your own growth. The circle you're cleaning? It includes you. Sweep well. Let me tell you about the last days of Kim Philby, the spy we discussed earlier. After decades of betrayal, after destroying countless operations and endangering countless lives, Philby finally defected to the Soviet Union in 1963. He arrived in Moscow expecting a hero's welcome. He'd given everything for the cause. He'd sacrificed his country, his friends, his reputation. And when he got there, the KGB gave him a small apartment and never let him leave. They didn't trust him. They knew, better than anyone, that a man who betrays one side will betray another. Philby spent his last decades in lonely suspicion, watched by the very people he'd sacrificed everything to serve. He died in 1988, a prisoner of his own methodology. Here's what Philby never understood. Betrayal is not a tool. It's a toxin. It doesn't just poison the relationship you destroy, it poisons you. It rewires your brain to see everyone through the lens of what they can give you, what they cost you, how they might eventually fail you. The betrayer becomes the most betrayed person of all because they've lost the capacity to trust. And without trust, there is no intimacy, no rest, no peace. You are not Philby. You're not learning these patterns to use them. You're learning them to protect something precious, your ability to love and trust without being destroyed. The Keyhole Confessor uses pain as currency. They buy your loyalty with their trauma and expect you to pay interest forever. The Thermostat uses ambiguity as armor. They stay safe by staying undefined, but they also stay alone, because no one builds a fortress with someone who won't stand on solid ground. The mirror uses virtue as a mask. They perform goodness so convincingly that even they don't know when the performance ends and they begin. You've seen them. You've tested them. You've extracted them. Silently, surgically, without the drama they would have used against you. Now you rebuild. Not by closing yourself off. Not by becoming the cynical, paranoid person you feared becoming. But by opening yourself selectively. By trusting slowly. By watching patterns instead of words. By giving people the chance to earn their way up the ladder, rung by rung, year by year. Start today. Look at your phone. Scroll through your contacts. Who's on rung 5? Who's actually proven themselves through time, cost, and consistency? Reach out to them this week. Not for anything. Just to say thank you. Just to acknowledge that you see them. Just to water the 1 or 2 plants in your garden that actually bear fruit. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. Your circle is small but immovable. When crisis comes, and it will come, you don't have to wonder who'll show up. You know, because you've tested them, because you've chosen them, because you've become the kind of person who attracts loyalty by being loyal. You don't scan rooms for threats anymore. You don't replay conversations for hidden meanings. You've done the work. The walls are strong. The gates are watched. And inside those walls, you can finally rest. The knife never comes from the front, but neither does the hand that pulls you from the fire. Learn to tell the difference. Trust what's proven, and become the person someone else will someday call their safest place. If this landed in your chest instead of just your head, you're ready for what comes next. Subscribe if you haven't. And if you want the deeper work, the exercises, the frameworks, the uncensored conversations about what actually lives in the human shadow, you know where to find it. Most won't go there. That's why most stay stuck. See you on the other side.